Maseches Nedarim Daf Nun a test takes us to the end of the 7th parak of the Masechta, and we're still looking for answers and asking questions about the sugya. What happens when you have a plant, onions or something like that, that is iser, and then it grows additional growth, and that growth is heter? Is that growth considered to be a separate entity? And if there's more new growth and old growth, it could actually be mavatal, the old growth? Or do we say that it's considered to be the same entity as the original growth, and it takes on that additional halacha, that same halacha, it just keeps the original halacha, and just an extension, more actual fruit, but it's the same halacha that extends? We have just said that the psak is that it's considered to be a new entity, and therefore it could have a different halacha and could actually be mavatal, the original growth. Numar now wants to bring a raya from our last Mishnah. That's not true. In our Mishnah we've been discussing somebody makes a neder, asking a fruit, and then that fruit is replanted and it grows. So the Mishnah had distinguished between whether it's a type of fruit that rots and a new plant grows, or whether it's the type of fruit that continues to exist and additional growth gets added on, like onions. So our Mishnah had said that if it's a new plant, and then it depends what the language he used is. If it's an old plant and it's just additional growth, then the halacha is that if the first onion, for example, if it was an onion, if the first onion has an isser on it because somebody made a neder, then whatever additionally grows is going to have the same halacha, the same neder, the same isser will continue, and it won't make a difference the fact that it's new growth. So this is a clear proof then that the new growth has the same halacha as the old growth. Is not considered to be a separate entity. How can we paskin otherwise that the new growth is a different entity? So Gemara wants to say we could distinguish between something which is also because of a neder and something which is also because of an innate iser. Something which is also because of a neder is considered to be like a davar sheyesh lo matirin, because you could always matir it, you could always make it permitted by asking a chacham to be show on the neder, to take the neder off, to show that you regret it and the neder does not exist. Therefore, it's possible, most neder is possible to take them off. Now, what the halachas we've seen before is that davar sheyesh lo matirin can never be batal. Yeah, that's true. That's the reason here why in this case it says that the growth of the onion is not going to be mavatal the onion itself under any circumstances, because the original neder that ars the onion is davar sheyesh lo matirin, and that's why it's considered to be the same entity. Not really because it's the same entity, but just because you can't have bittul on the original onion because it's davar sheyesh lo matirin. So Gemara answers, but I'll show you that the Gemara asks on that. I'll show you that there is another type of thing which you could ask and you could get a heter for, and we don't give it the halacha of a davar sheyesh lo matirin and say that it's never batal. That's truma. Truma, if somebody mistakenly makes something truma, he could always take the truma off. He could go to a chacham and say, I didn't mean to make that a truma, I'm taking it off. And the chacham will give him a pesach, and it works just like a neder. So therefore, according to what you're telling me, says the Gemara, that a neder is considered to be a davar sheyesh lo matirin because you could take it off by she'ela l'chacham. Truma should also be a davar sheyesh lo matirin. You should take it off by she'ela l'chacham. If that's so, then there should be no bittul of any kind. But we have a Mishnah that says clearly that there is a sheer bittul of truma. The sheer bittul is 100 times. If it falls into less than 100 times, then the entire mixture is aser. If it falls into more than 100 times, then the entire mixture is mutter because it is batal. Now, this Mishnah is talking about truma tameya, which is important because truma tameya is not mutter to anybody. It's not mutter to a Yisrael because it's truma, not mutter to a kohen because it's tameya. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you pshat here. Pshat here is that it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin because we're talking about where this truma was already given to the kohen. You can only take off the halacha of truma by she'ela l'chacham before you give it to the kohen. Here it was given to the kohen, and that's why there's no she'ela l'chacham, and that's why there is bittul on it. It's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. So it says it can't be we're talking about where you already gave it to the kohen, because if you continue reading the Mishnah, it says further, it says that if it was truma tehira, then you don't have any problem giving it to a kohen. The kohen is allowed to eat it. So what you should do is sell it to a kohen. Sell the entire mixture to the kohen. Because don't rely on bittul. Instead, take the entire mixture with the truma that fell into it. If we're talking about truma tahira, sell it to a kohen. Sell him the whole thing. And to him, the truma is not a problem. So the Gemara says, if you're talking about where it was already given to the kohen, why would you be telling me to sell it to a kohen? The Gemara says, no, maybe it was already given to the kohen, but now it belongs to Yisrael. How so? Yisrael inherited it from his grandfather, from his mother's father, who was a kohen. Now it belongs to Yisrael. Yisrael can't eat it because it has truma mixed in. And you should therefore, the truma that was mixed in was the Yisrael's grandfather left him truma, and that truma was mixed into the rest of his food. Should now sell the entire thing to a kohen, and there's no heter, it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, because it was already given to the kohen. Gemara says this is also not correct, because if that's true, if that's the pshat, then the truma belongs to the Yisrael. He wants to sell it, he could sell it, but it belongs to the Yisrael. There's no issue of ownership. If that's the case, so then how come when he sells it to a kohen, the Mishnah tells me sell it to him except for the value of truma that's in it? That only makes sense if it was never given to a kohen. So Yisrael can't sell the value of the truma that's in it because he has no right to keep it. It has to go to a kohen. It's a mammon kohen. It's mammon shevet. However, if you're telling me that it already belongs to the Yisrael because he inherited from his grandfather, it's his money. It doesn't have to be given to a kohen at all. So therefore, he could sell it to a kohen if he wants for full price. How come we should take that value out? Obviously, then it's incorrect what you're saying. This was not given to a kohen at all. So the Gemara first to revise its answer. The Gemara says something similar. The Gemara says, okay, it's not that we're talking about where that a truma could have the iser taken off by she'elu l'chacham. The pshat is as follows: a neder is a mitzvah to take the iser off. You're not supposed to make nedarim, as we've learned in the name of Rabbi Nassan a number of times. Anybody who makes a neder is like building a bama, and somebody who keeps a neder is like bringing a carbon on the bama. So you're not supposed to have a nedarim on you. Therefore, it's a mitzvah to do she'elu l'chacham and take it off. That's why it's called the davar sheyesh l'matirim, because that's what you're supposed to do. Now, truma is not considered to be davar sheyesh l'matirim, because even though you could do she'ela and take it off, and we're not talking about where it's going to the kohen, so you still could, it's still not considered to be davar sheyesh l'matirim, because there is no mitzvah to take off the halach of truma by she'ela l'chacham. Gemara now starts a new but related sugya. We'll still get back to this discussion. The Gemara wants to know, is there a concept that a heter can actually go off something? So the Gemara refers to a statement that Rav Yechanan said earlier. The Gemara says that Rabbah quoted him. Rav Yechanan talked about the case where somebody had onions that are metukin, onions that had already had truma ma'aser taken off them. They were mutter. There was no isser of tevel on them. Then you planted them, and they grew. Now they have 10 times as many onions. So Rav Yechanan had said that the halacha is that you have to take ma'aser again, not only on the new growth, but even on the original onion. So when Rabbah said this over in his name, so Rav Chizda said, "Who's going to listen to you and your Rebbe Rabbi Yechanan? Why should you have to take truma and ma'aser again on onions that were taken already? Just because you planted them, what happened to the heter? They already had a state of heter on it." So Rabbah said back, I'll prove to you from a Mishnah that the actual heter can go off. The Mishnah talks about somebody who left onions out in the field and it rained on them and they sprouted. Now, question was, these onions were metukim, they did not need truma and ma'aser again, but the Mishnah says you do have to take truma and ma'aser again if the sprouts came from the ground, which shows that it was being nourished from the ground, is considered to be new growth, and you have to take truma again. If they came from the onion, not from the ground, then you don't have to take truma again. And the Mishnah gives simanim. There's actually 2 opinions what the simanim are, whether the new growth was nourished from the onion or nourished from the ground. Now, according to you, that you're telling me there's no such thing as heter falling off, so why should I have to take truma again, even if it was nourished from the ground? What happened to the heter? So Rav Chizda responded, he said, what are you talking about? The halach you have to take truma again is not talking about the old onion. It's talking about the new growth. It's talking about the sproutings. The sproutings never had a heter, so if it grew from the ground, of course you have to take truma again. The old onion, you don't have to. So Rabbah responded and said that can't be correct because the next part of the Mishnah says that, and it's a different opinion. Shimon ben Gamliel weighs in the next part, and he says no, what grew in an obligation of truma is chayav in truma, and what grew pater remains pater from truma. So he's differentiating between the new growth and the old growth. The Tanna Kama is obviously not. So the Tanna Kama is saying even the onion, the original onion, has to take truma again. According to you, what happened to the original heter? What happened to the heter? So Chizda responded and he said, no, it's all Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and the Mishnah is explaining itself, and he's adding, and it's saying you don't have to take truma again from the old stuff, only from the new stuff, because Rav Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, what grew in chiv is chayav, what grew in petur is pater. Now, the Gemara wants to say, maybe we do clearly see here, though, a raya to our question of whether the new growth could be mevatel the old growth, because here Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is not saying that the new growth can be mevatel the old growth. He's saying that they have different halachos. Someone says, no, maybe not. Maybe here the reason why the new growth is not mevatel the old growth is because you didn't work for the new growth. You just left the onions out. You didn't actually go plant them and get new growth. So it just came on its own. So that's why it's not strong enough to be mevatel. But in a case where the new growth is planted, you did work to get it, maybe it's mevatel the old growth. Mark says, but that can be because the whole question was brought up in a case where you planted onions And we said you have to take meiser on them again. We just discussed this case before. But the original onions, you have to take meiser on, but you have to take meiser on from a different crop, from last year's crop, not from this year's crop. Because the halach is you can only take meiser on something from the year that it grew, from the co-year crop. So these onions are from last year, so you got to take from last year's crop meiser on them. So if you want to say that whenever you worked on it, it could be mevatel, so these should be batel to the new growth, and it should have the halacha of the new growth. You should be able to take meiser from this year's crop and not from last year's crop. Why do you have to go back to last year's crop? So one wants to say, no, meiser is different. In meiser, there's a special pasuk that says, aser to aser is called to us zar acha. We call it your plant. You have to take meiser on your stuff. That means that there's a possibility of taking meiser again on heter. That means it's something which is zar acha, which is yours, and you planted it. You still have to take meiser on it again. And that would be a case like this where it remained extant, it remained around, such as these onions that you planted and are still here. You got to take meiser again. There's a special clear that they remain separate, and therefore you have to take meiser on them from last year's. All right, the Gemara now has more statements of other Amoraim on the question of is new growth mevatel the old growth. Merkos of Chanina Tirto says the name of Rav Yanai, if you have an onion of truma that you planted and it grew new growth and the new growth is more, then it's mutter, and the Gemara says this clearly implies that the new growth is mevatel the old growth. So I'm going to ask you, I have a Mishnah that says that the growth of truma is considered to be truma as well. It means that it's not a new separate entity, it's the halach of the old entity. It couldn't possibly be mevatel it. Someone says, no, I was talking about the growth of the growth, where you took the growth, you planted it again, and then that grew new growth. That's 2 steps removed. That has a separate halacha and could be mevatel the old growth. But the actual first layer, the first level of new growth, that has the same halacha as the old growth. Asks the Gemara, that can't be the pshat. We can't be referring to second level growth because you have a brisa that clearly says it out. It says that the second level growth is chulin, and it has a different halacha. It's not the halacha of the truma itself. So what would you be adding over here? So Gemara says, okay, my chiddush is that it's true even in the case of onions, where the original vegetable doesn't rot. You, from this Mishnah, only learned about something like wheat, where the original fruit rots, and you get a new plant out of it. I'm talking about where the original fruit is still around, like onions and root vegetables of that sort. Gemara says, what do you mean? Well, onions and vegetables of that sort, it's not true. There, the halacha is that it maintains the original halacha, like we saw in our Mishnah, that it says something that is tevel. If it was like onions, that the original fruit is around, then it remains usher, even through all the layers. Gemara says, no. In all the layers that are mutter, when I'm saying that they're mutter, it's where the second level growth was a rove, it was a majority, it overwhelmed even the first level growth. Where do we say that in the case of onions, where the original fruit is around, that all the layers of growth remain usher? That's only if it wasn't a majority. But here you had a majority in the first layer, a majority in the second layer. Now you already have heter, and that's the end of the 7th parak of the Masechta.